It feels like the DS lineup in general has existed for a very long time. Since the release of the first Nintendo DS, to the new 3DS and 2DS XL, it is beyond apparent to me that we have reached the end of the DS's life. With that said, I decided to purchase a 3DS and take a look back at all of its greatness. Without delving too deep into nostalgia, let's review the new 3DS XL and examine if it's actually worth a purchase in 2019. The 3DS always had a great build quality and, in my opinion, a very comfortable design for prolonged gaming. I would say this about the original 3DS, then the slightly larger new 3DS, and the new 3DS XL. The one that I'm looking at today has a glossy finish on the entirety of its outer shell and matte on the interactive surface or within its shell. Now, this exact version, the Fire Emblem Fates Edition 3DS, is the perfect version for me, since I love the black and white color scheme, and generally it's the theme of the channel, at least what I try to go with. I love the subtle accents on the front and back. It's just everything I would want out of it. The clamshell design is still best for portability and very easy to stick in your pocket or stick in a bag. But the most important thing is that it does fit in your pocket for the most part. It depends on how big your pockets are. Usually even this one will fit in pretty much any kind of pocket. However, that cannot be said for the 2DS, which came out a couple of years ago. Did not have a clamshell design. It was more of a flat tablet-esque design that was a lot more difficult to travel with just because you couldn't close it up. So this design is definitely the best thing around. And as for ports, you're going to find the proprietary charging port all the way at the top, and at the bottom you're going to find the game slot. And then you're also going to find a slot for your stylus, and under the backplate you're going to find the micro SD card slot. For buttons, you will be able to find your usual ABXY buttons: start, select, C-stick, home button, your D-pad, your usual thumbstick, L, R, ZL, and ZR buttons. You'll also find the volume slider, 3D toggle, a power button at the bottom with a gorgeous 3.5mm jack. Wish we saw more of those in 2019. As for the screen, or I should say, the screens, you've got the double screen setup we've always had, with each running at a different resolution and aspect ratio. Though by now, these two definitely look pretty dated, I would say. Games still look nice, these screens, but it's very obviously last generation. 3D games won't look all that great in my opinion, but that's due to the 3DS's capabilities, with Xenoblade Chronicles being a prime example of just that. But 2D games look really nice, even with the 3D effect. This is also true for games that incorporate aspects of both the 2D and 3D components. Fire Emblem Conquest, with its gorgeous cutscenes at least, still looks fantastic on both of these screens. That is all mostly due to the art style, but still it is very nice that the 3DS can produce graphics of that caliber to an extent, even if it's just towards the cutscenes and not necessarily towards the actual gameplay. However, I would still say that these two screens are just enough for the kind of games that you will be able to play on the 3DS. And also with the Nintendo 3DS, you've got those small gimmicky little things that are still a little bit of fun to go back and touch on. For example, you can draw on your 3DS if you wanted to, which is great. It's something I really liked doing as a kid as well, just because I was so into animation and drawing. Right now I'm an animation major in college, so yeah, it's something that definitely helped along the way. And also you could take pictures of yourself if you wanted to, and you could do it in 3D. I mean, those are just little things that you probably won't be able to find anywhere else. And hey, even though they're completely gimmicky and useless game-wise, it's still cool to have, quite honestly. Someone out there appreciates it. And speaking of battery life, the Nintendo 3DS does have pretty amazing battery life. Now, it doesn't have a huge battery by any means, but it can definitely handle being played with for a very long time. It will easily last you all day. At least it has for me. It's not all that often that I end up having to charge it, even though I don't necessarily play this all day long, because I have a job and school and YouTube. I'm a very busy person. Any chance that I get, I do end up going back to the 3DS. I still get to play for a couple of hours a day, usually when I get the luxury. Well, I can say I don't end up having to charge this guy all that often. So hey, this would actually be a great console to carry with you on long trips, which is what I'm going to do soon when I finally take a vacation. However, it won't matter if I don't talk about the games or talking about any kind of console. The 3DS has a lot of games to offer in that department, with some of my favorite games of last generation, including Pokemon Omega Ruby, Fire Emblem Fates, Kingdom Hearts 3D, and yes, I did actually like that game for its gameplay, though not necessarily for the story. There's Shin Megami Tensei 4, also the Apocalypse version, Mario Maker, Super Mario 3D Land, and more. Not to mention the simpler indie games that, while they were obviously copies of other games, were still casual fun. And one game that I keep mentioning here is Fire Emblem Conquest. Conquest is part of the Fates line. Conquest is the path that I personally chose. I'm huge on RPGs, as I'm sure you've noticed. This game looked gorgeous to me at the time and even still now. The sprites were super adorable, the art style looked great, and these screens and those fully animated 3D cutscenes look far too good, even on these screens. It's a pretty huge game too. You can definitely sink a lot of hours into it, especially if you decide to go for the other version of the game, Birthright, because that way you're going to have access to all three paths, which is the light path, the dark path, and the one where you defy both. Quite frankly, it's something that you wouldn't expect from a small handheld like the 3DS, so it is still very impressive in my opinion. Now, the most graphically intensive game on the 3DS is probably Xenoblade Chronicles. This game never looked good to me, though I understand that there were many performance complications within the 3DS's hardware that held this game back graphically. Nonetheless, this is a fantastic RPG to be enthralled in, and even today, after playing Xenoblade Chronicles 2 on the Switch, I can still appreciate the pocket-sized, yet deep battle system that you get with this game. There's a ton of fun to be had if you can look past the graphics. It's still really cool that you can carry a game of that size on such a small device. Now, Shin Megami Tensei 4 and Apocalypse were games that I always considered to be too dark to truly belong within Nintendo's lineup, but I'm very happy to have these games here. This series is genuinely the most immersive and enthralling franchise I have ever played through, and the most recent installments are only available on the 3DS. This game alone was actually worth the purchase of a second 3DS to me, so that I could experience this game and a nicer screen. All of this is subjective, however, but to me it was completely worth it, and hey, it looks fantastic on the bigger new 3DS screen. And of course, we can't really talk about any Nintendo console without talking about any of the Mario games. So for that, I've got Super Mario 3D Land and a couple of other ones, but this is the one I'd like to focus on. Super Mario 3D Land was obviously a ton of fun for me. Coming from Super Mario DS, I was yearning for a truly 3D experience from Mario, and whole nostalgia will not allow me to learn any better. This game was still refreshing to have. I still had a lot of fun with it, even if it's not the same experience that we had back in the day. Which now brings me directly into Super Smash Bros. Smash Bros goes without saying here. It was another surprising installment of the 3DS, to me at least, because of its art style. This game looked awesome on this console. It was still the same fast-paced, action-packed Smash experience that I was used to having for so many years, but brought all the way to a pocket-sized form factor. I couldn't have asked for anything more. I sunk so many hours into this game, even back in high school, when in the lunchroom I used to stick around with a group of kids and we would play Super Smash Bros. For pretty much the entirety of it. Now, the most recent version is on Nintendo Switch, so that's the version I will be playing moving forward, but it was still really cool having it here. And it should also go without saying that I'm a huge Pokemon fan, and I'm very invested in the competitive scene. So I have to talk about Pokemon games. X and Y were a ton of fun and brought interesting looking Pokemon that were still competitively viable. The graphics looked awesome to me at the time. Omega Ruby was so damn great as well. I splurged so many hours in this game since EV training had become so much more digestible since X and Y. Also, the new Mega Evolutions added an interesting mechanic to the competitive scene. While the graphics in Sun and Moon, though, looked nicer than ever, I wasn't huge on the game itself. The legendaries looked meh to me. Even stat-wise, I'm not huge on tropical regions either. But all of this is subjective, of course. I'm just giving you my opinion entirely. If you love the game, then please, by all means, continue to love the game. But hey, I still enjoyed the playthrough, and it was still a cool story. And now, I have to say that my best memories are honestly Pokemon related for the most part. This is even including the original DS, the DSi and the 3DS line. It was what I focused on most, but all of those other RPGs that I mentioned contributed greatly to my experience of owning a 3DS. This console has always looked really cool to me, and even when I was very little, and even today as a 22-year-old, this console is still fantastic, a ton of fun to have, and so many games to be played on this and even replayed. But it is time that we acknowledge the truth, even though many of us have already for quite a while. With the release of the Nintendo Switch, the majority of people already knew that the 3DS was going to be tossed aside. because the Nintendo Switch can already be taken portably. It's still relatively small, you can stick it in a bag, or even some people like to stick it in their pockets. But even with the release of the Switch Mini, the Nintendo Switch is going to become much more portable, and it handles games a lot better. It has a much more powerful processor, and well, the kind of games that we're getting to the Nintendo Switch, mostly AAA games, still run really nicely on that console. So with other developers also like Atlus, who are bringing Shin Megami Tensei 5 to the Nintendo Switch, probably won't be releasing any more games for the 3DS. The Pokemon team, they're also putting games into the Nintendo Switch now, as they already have at the time of posting this video with Pokemon Let's Go Pikachu and Let's Go Eevee, and with the soon releasing Pokemon Sword and Shield. With all of those important games being moved over to the Nintendo Switch, it is more difficult to argue why the 3DS would be a great purchase, and I do understand that. This console is dead. It's dead to Nintendo. Now, I have a Nintendo Switch, but even after owning a Nintendo Switch, I still went ahead and purchased another 3DS. And it is because of all of the many games that are available that you won't find on Switch. So many different experiences. And also, I want to make sure that if Game Freak ever allows us to migrate all kinds of Pokemon, that I could still migrate all of the ones that I had ever since I was a kid, and they're all in here at the moment. However, the DS line in general has always been very important. They've always been incredibly popular, and they were actually great for many different types of gamers. Specifically the casual ones, however, I have to admit, we have little gimmicky things like the ability to just draw on the screen or even just take pictures with it. It was really a console that was built for most casual people, I would say. And now the Nintendo Switch is a culmination of all of that. The Nintendo Switch can do everything that the 3DS can, but even better, for maybe the exception of the 3D, but I'm sure the majority of people don't care, if I'm quite honest. This console is amazing. There's so many games to catch up with when it comes to this guy, and well, it is time to say goodbye to the greatness that was the Nintendo 3DS, but I'm not planning on getting rid of this one. And so, it's time to end this video on a bittersweet note. I will miss getting new 3DS games every now and then that someone somewhere managed to hate on because it wasn't hardcore enough. The 3DS, or just the DS line in general, delivered experiences that you simply cannot find anywhere else. It had an awesome run, but it's time to look into the future. However, I had to answer the question that I posed at the start of the video. If just like me, you were interested in getting your hands on a 3DS, or were looking for reasons to keep yours, then I hope that this nostalgia trip helped make your decision a little bit easier. But let's go ahead and reiterate my conclusion again. If you don't have a Nintendo 3DS and were considering getting one at all, take a look at the games library, see if there's anything that interests you. And if any of the games that I mentioned piqued your interest, then yeah, it would quite frankly be worth it, because you probably won't find a lot of those games anywhere else. And if you were debating whether or not you should get rid of your Nintendo 3DS, I would honestly still hang on to it. I probably wouldn't get rid of it, just in case in the future you decide that you want to take another look back at it. Who knows how the prices might fluctuate in the future, since these will no longer be produced after some time. That's why I made sure to get mine now, and this specific design, because I'm afraid I'll never see this one again. However, I hope all of this helps answer your questions, and well, whatever you decide to do, happy gaming. And now, if you were interested in buying a Nintendo 3DS, then I'll be leaving my affiliate link for Amazon in the description. If you decide to use this link, then we do get a small commission, which helps us run things a little more smoothly around here, though this is all at no additional cost to you. So do consider it if you'd like to support us. And that is it for me. This was a very long video, but it was very much well worth making. This has been Francisco from Tech Summit. Thank you for watching, and I'll be seeing you all later. Enjoy.